The crack in the foundation. They say the most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in a perfectly normal evening. She was on the couch. Glass of wine. Soft laughter at something on her laptop. She kissed my shoulder when she walked past to refill her glass. Everything was exactly, precisely normal. And that right there, was the thing that should have terrified me. But I didn't know that yet. One sentence. Spoken almost as an afterthought by a man who had no idea what it would set in motion. That's all it took to begin unraveling 12 years of marriage, one quiet truth at a time. My name is Edwin Holland. I'm 42 years old. And what I'm about to tell you is not a story about betrayal. It's a story about what a man discovers when he finally decides to stop trusting the version of his life he was handed and start looking for the one that was actually real. I run operations for a mid-sized restaurant chain out of Charlotte, North Carolina. 7 locations. 40-plus staff. The kind of work that fills your head before your feet even hit the floor in the morning. My wife, Ella, was 39. Sharp in that polished, professional way, marketing director for a regional healthcare company downtown. We had a daughter, Mia. 9 years old, purple backpack, one pigtail always half loose by the end of the school day, and the kind of laugh that could fix a hard week in about 4 seconds. On paper, we were exactly what people mean when they say relationship goals. Nice house. Date nights every other Friday. Decent savings. The kind of couple other people point to at dinner and smile. We had everything that looks like love from the outside. Left pointing magnifying glass the moment everything shifted. It started on a Thursday in late October. My truck was in for brake work. My colleague Reed Garner, solid man, mid-40s, not the gossiping type, offered to drive me back toward the city after a vendor meeting in Concord. We were 20 minutes into the drive, talking shop, when Reed went quiet. Then, almost like he was thinking out loud, he said, "Hey, random question. Does Ella still drive that white Acura? The MDX?" I glanced over. "Yeah. Why?" He kept his eyes on the road. Saw a car matching the description parked outside Meridian Grill 2 nights ago. Tuesday. I was dropping off paperwork for the evening manager. Noticed it because of the parking sticker on the back, same gym my wife Carla goes to. He paused. There was a guy with her. Didn't think much of it. Just figured it was a work thing. What did he look like? Reed shrugged. Tall. Dark jacket. They were walking in together. Clothes. I nodded. I changed the subject. But something inside me had already shifted, quiet and invisible, like a fault line adjusting beneath still ground. I had always trusted Ella completely. And in the space of one ordinary car ride with a business partner, 12 years of certainty had just developed its first visible crack. Crescent moon that night. The weight of normal. When I got home, Ella was on the couch. Wine. Earbuds in. She pulled one out and smiled at me, that easy, practice smile. Long day. Yeah, I said. Supply meeting. Ran over. Dinner's in the fridge. Made that lemon chicken you like. I went to the kitchen. I heated the plate. I ate standing at the counter, staring at the window above the sink while the neighborhood outside went dark. She came in briefly to refill her wine, kissed my shoulder, and went back to the couch. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly, precisely normal. That was the part that got me. I scrolled back through her texts from Tuesday. She'd messaged me at 6:47 p.m., staying a bit late. Quarterly review prep. Don't wait up. Meridian Grill was 12 minutes from her office. It was also not a place you grabbed a quick bite during a work crunch. It was the kind of place you went when you wanted the evening to feel like something. I didn't confront her. Not that night. I wasn't ready. I needed more than Reed's offhand observation. I needed to know if my gut was reacting to something real, or if I was about to blow up my marriage over a parking lot coincidence. So I did what any man does when he's not ready to face the answer. I made a mental note, said goodnight to my wife, and lay in the dark next to her, listening to her breathe. Sleep didn't come easy. But the decision did. I was going to find out what was really going on. Quietly. carefully, without showing a single card until I had the whole hand. And what I found would be far worse than anything I had imagined. Stay with me. 3 days of silence. The test. For the next 3 days, I said nothing. I smiled at breakfast. I asked about her meetings. I helped Mia with her homework while Ella sat on the couch scrolling her phone. Normal routine. Exactly what she expected from me. But I was listening now. Really listening. Not the half-present nod and move on kind I'd been doing for years. I mean the kind where you catch the half-second pause before an answer. Where you notice the slight shift in someone's eyes when they're reaching for a story rather than a memory. Ella's alibi structure was clean. Too clean. Every evening she was away, there was a reason. Always reasonable. Always just vague enough to not invite follow-up. I tested the edges gently. Casually. The way you press on a bruise to figure out how deep it goes. Didn't you say Denise was out of town this month? I asked one morning, keeping my eyes on my coffee mug. That's next week, she said without missing a beat. She pushed it back. Right, I said. I forgot. She didn't even look up from her phone. That's when I knew. A guilty person defends. An innocent person barely registers the question. Ella didn't just answer, she corrected me. Smoothly. Reflexively. Like she'd been keeping track. Airplane # the Friday that wasn't. The following Friday, I told Ella I had to fly to Nashville, emergency operations issue at one of our locations. I packed a bag. I drove to the airport. I parked in short term. I sat in the terminal for 40 minutes, had a coffee, and turned around. By 6:15 p.m., I was parked 3 blocks from Meridian Grill. At 7:02, Ella's white Acura pulled into the lot. She stepped out in a charcoal wrap dress I hadn't seen in months. Heels I didn't recognize. Hair down. Before she walked to the entrance, she checked herself in the side mirror. Not a quick glance. A deliberate one. He arrived 8 minutes later. Tall. Mid-30s. Athletic build. Confident in the way men are when they've never had a reason not to be. He didn't touch her outside. Didn't need to. The way she turned toward him before he even reached her, open, warm, leaning in, said everything. They went inside together. I sat in my truck for 2 hours and 40 minutes. When they came out, she was laughing at something he'd said. Her hand briefly touched his arm before she caught herself and pulled it back. Old habit. New discipline. She didn't scan the lot. She didn't look over her shoulder. She walked to her car like a woman with nothing to account for. And I drove home the long way, alone, in the dark. File dividers # Tom Shea, building the case. The next morning, I made a call. A private investigator named Tom Shea, referred by a former colleague who'd been through something similar. We met at a diner near my office. He asked the right questions and none of the wrong ones. I gave him dates. The name of the restaurant. The description of the man. Then I added one more thing, something I hadn't even fully understood why I was asking until the words were already out of my mouth. I need to know about a company retreat. About 11 years ago. My wife worked at Renfield Health Group. I need to know who her direct supervisor was at that event. Tom looked at me steadily. You think it goes back that far? I think, I said carefully, there are questions I should have asked a long time ago. File folder. The folder on the diner table. 9 days later, Tom didn't call with a report. He called with a request to meet in person. That told me something before he said a single word. He slid a manila folder across the table and let me open it myself. The man's name was Owen Marsh. 38 years old. Sales consultant. Married. His wife's name was Nain. The folder held photographs. Time-stamped surveillance. Owen and Ella walking into Meridian Grill. A second shot, a different evening, a wine bar on South End. A third one, taken through a restaurant window, Ella's hand resting across the table, her fingers on top of his. How long? At least 7 months, Tom said. Possibly longer. They're careful, but not invisible. Same 2 or 3 locations. Always weekday evenings. Never weekends. Never weekends. Because weekends were for family. For Mia. For me. I closed the folder. What about the retreat? Renfield Health Group. Tom pulled a second sheet from his jacket. A staff directory. A name circled in blue pen. Kurt Strickland. Senior Marketing Director. Her direct supervisor at the annual retreat. 11 years ago exactly. 2 colleagues Tom had spoken to, off the record, both remembered them as inseparable that weekend. I stared at that name. Ella had come home from that retreat on a Sunday night. I'd picked her up from the airport. She'd been quiet, pale in a way I'd chalked up to a long weekend. We stopped for food on the way home. She barely ate. 8 months and 3 weeks later, Mia was born. The math didn't announce itself. It didn't shout. It just started running, quietly, relentlessly, in the back of my mind. The kind of arithmetic you don't want to do but cannot stop once it starts. Less than 2%. I ordered a home DNA kit online that night. Prepaid card. Separate email. 2-day shipping. And I booked something else I had been quietly avoiding for years, a complete fertility evaluation at a men's health clinic on the east side of Charlotte. The doctor was quiet, methodical, early 50s. He asked standard questions. I answered them honestly. Then I asked for the full panel. 4 days later, I sat in the examination room and listened to him explain, in measured, clinical language, that my sperm count was in the lowest 2% of men tested at that clinic. He used words like motility, morphology, subfertility. He said that natural conception in my case was, in his professional opinion, extremely unlikely. Could a man with these results have fathered a child naturally, without medical intervention? He was quiet for a moment. It's not something I can rule out entirely, but I'd be doing you a disservice if I called it likely. I thanked him. I got in my truck. I drove to a park near my office and sat on a bench by the pond for 40 minutes without moving. Less than 2%. Mia was 9 years old. I had coached her T-ball team. I had held her hand during every thunderstorm. I had read her the same 3 picture books so many times I could recite them from memory. And now a clinical report was telling me that the way her story began, the timing, the biology, the version I'd been handed, didn't add up. The DNA results arrived 2 days later. What I read in that envelope changed everything I thought I knew about the last 9 years of my life. And what happened next will break your heart open before it puts it back together. The truth, the reckoning, and the choice. Page facing up probability of paternity, 0%. The DNA results arrived on a Wednesday while Ella was at work and Mia was at school. I signed for the package at the door, walked straight to the kitchen, and read the instructions twice before I did anything else. Then I opened the results. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read it once. Then I set the paper down flat on the table and pressed both palms against the surface, breathing steadily. I walked to the garage. There was a ceramic planter on the workbench, one of Ella's decorating projects she'd abandoned halfway through. I picked it up. I hurled it against the concrete wall. It shattered into a dozen pieces. I stood there looking at the fragments, chest heaving, fists clenched. Then I bent down, picked up every single piece, dropped them in the trash, and went back inside. I sat at the kitchen table. I looked at Mia's drawing on the fridge, her name written in purple crayon in the bottom right corner, letters still a little uneven. And I understood something in that moment that no legal document could ever fully capture. You can love someone completely and still be unable to stay inside the lie that built your place in their life. Those two things don't cancel each other out. But they cannot coexist forever either. Girl, the school pickup. The face in the crowd. 3 days later, I arrived early to pick Mia up from school, unusual for me, but I'd left work late that afternoon. I waited near the main entrance with a handful of other parents, hands in my pockets. When the doors opened and the kids came streaming out, I spotted Mia immediately. Purple backpack. One pigtail already half loose. She was walking beside another girl, taller, dark-haired, same age, and they were laughing. As they got closer, I caught the other girl's profile. And something went rigid in my chest. The cheekbones. The set of the eyes. The way her brow tilted slightly when she laughed. I had seen that face before. In a folder Tom Shea had slid across a diner table. "Dad, this is Sophie. We're in the same reading group." "Hi, Sophie," I said. My voice came out level. "I don't know how." On the drive home, Mia told me Sophie's dad was some kind of business consultant and that he sometimes picked Sophie up on Tuesdays. I nodded and asked follow-up questions I barely heard the answers to. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. Sophie Strickland. Same school. Same reading group. Same face. They were half-sisters sitting in the same classroom. And neither of them knew. Scales # Daniel Mercer, the attorney. I retained Daniel Mercer, a compact, precise man in his early 50s, and laid everything on his desk. Tom Shea's reports. The DNA result. The medical panel. The photographs of Ella and Owen Marsh. He read through it without expression, making occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When he finished, he looked up. "This is thorough. You've done the groundwork well." He walked me through the legal landscape plainly. North Carolina recognized fault-based adultery in divorce proceedings. The evidence was strong. But on paternity, he was careful. "You've been the legal father for 9 years. Even with a 0% DNA result, the court may not automatically sever that status. You could be required to continue financial support regardless of biology. So I could be legally responsible for a child that isn't mine because I didn't know she wasn't mine. That's a very real possibility. It's not a given. But it's a risk." Then I asked him about Kurt Strickland. "If you notify him, and if he acknowledges paternity, voluntarily or through a court-ordered test, that changes the landscape considerably. A confirmed biological father shifts legal and financial responsibility." "I want him notified," I said. "Through your office. Keep it clean." Daniel made a note. I shook his hand and left. Open door the Friday evening. The door closes. I chose a Friday evening. Mia had a sleepover at a friend's house. The house needed to be empty of everything that mattered before I opened the door to what was coming. I spent that afternoon methodically. I packed Ella's clothes into 2 large suitcases, deliberately folded where folding made sense, stacked where it didn't. I left her grandmother's jewelry in the bathroom drawer. I wasn't going to be the kind of man who uses sentiment as a weapon. She walked in at 6:42 p.m. I heard the garage door. Her keys hitting the bowl by the door. The familiar rhythm of her heels on the tile. She came into the kitchen already talking, something about traffic, and stopped mid-sentence when she saw the suitcases. "What is this?" "Sit down," I said. I placed 3 items on the table in a row, evenly spaced. The photo report. The DNA result. The medical panel. "Owen Marsh," I said. 7 months that I know of. Probably longer. She opened her mouth. I held up one hand. The DNA result. "Mia is not my biological daughter. Probability of paternity, 0. Something moved through her expression. Not guilt. Not grief. Something more complicated. She set her bag slowly on the counter. "The medical report," I continued. "My fertility numbers. Less than 2% probability of natural conception. Which means you knew, or should have known, that there was a serious question about Mia's parentage. And you said nothing for 9 years." The silence between us had weight. Then she spoke, quietly. "You stopped being present. You were always at work. I was invisible in this marriage long before Owen." "That's not a confession," I said. "That's a deflection." Her jaw tightened. "You want me to apologize for surviving a marriage where I felt completely alone?" "I want you to acknowledge," I said evenly, "that you came home from a corporate retreat 11 years ago knowing you might be pregnant by your supervisor, and you let me raise that child for 9 years without ever telling me the truth. That's not loneliness, Ella. That's a choice. A deliberate, sustained choice." She looked away. A muscle in her jaw moved. "You're leaving tonight. The suitcases are packed. I left your grandmother's jewelry in the bathroom drawer. Papers are being prepared, fault-based adultery documented. You'll hear from Daniel's office early next week. I paused. And I want you to know, Kurt Strickland has been notified through my attorney. That landed. She went very still. You had no right, she said, low and tight. He has a daughter in Mia's class, I replied. He has the right to know. She stood. She grabbed her bag. She looked at the suitcases, then back at me. And for a moment, I thought she might say something real, something that actually acknowledged the shape of what she'd done. She didn't. She picked up one suitcase handle, paused at the door. Without turning around, she said, "You were never going to be enough, Edwin." I looked at her back. "Maybe not," I said. "But I was always honest. There's a difference." The door closed. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. Not the quiet of a family winding down for the night. The quiet of a space that had finally stopped pretending. I picked up Mia's crayon drawing from the fridge, held it for a moment, and set it back carefully. Whatever came next, she was still my daughter in every way that had ever mattered. And I was still her father. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, you're not alone. Every week, we bring you stories of real heartbreak, real courage, and real people making impossible choices with nothing but their integrity to guide them. Stories that remind you that love is not just a feeling, it's a decision you make every day, in every moment of truth and silence. If you're new here, subscribe right now. Hit that bell so you never miss a story. And if this one stayed with you, if you found yourself thinking about Edwin, about Mia, about the quiet dignity of a man who chose honesty over comfort, leave a comment below. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the parking lot? The DNA result? The final words at the door? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And come back next week, because the next story is already waiting. Herb life lesson. The final word. The most courageous thing a person can do is face a painful truth without flinching, especially when staying in the lie would have been so much easier. Edwin Holland didn't just discover his wife's betrayal. He discovered something about himself, that he was the kind of man who would rather rebuild from the truth than live forever inside a beautiful lie. We all have moments where we catch a glimpse of something we don't want to see. A pause in someone's answer. A shift in their eyes. A detail that doesn't quite add up. And we have a choice in that moment, to look away or to look closer. Looking closer is terrifying, but it is the only path to a life that is actually yours. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself, for a child, for the truth, is to refuse to pretend anymore. Take care of yourselves. Be honest with the people you love. And never stop asking the questions that matter, even when the answers are the hardest things you've ever had to hold. Until next time.